coming up on More Than Before.
Letting the lessons of your past inform you, but not letting it define you, especially if you've gone through bad seasons or difficult times, to learn from that and move forward in positive ways, but to not let it bring you down, because the moment that we're in is a gift.
This is More Than Before with Nathan Cook.
Hey everyone, I am so excited for our guest today. He is currently the hospice chaplain with Providence Health. He is a stand-up comedian, which is the first that we've had on our show, so I'm really excited about it, and we're expecting really big things out of him. I was telling him earlier that if you ever want to screw up a comedian, you tell them that they're going to be funny. Like, tell the audience that they're going to be funny. But I am so excited for him to be on. He is a father. He is a husband. He's a really stand-up guy. Anthony Silano, welcome to the show, brother. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Nathan. Appreciate it.
I expect many more puns and many more bad jokes to come from my side, not from your side, though.
Oh, I'm all for it. I love a good pun, so let's do
So
it. Let's
you
roll
are
them
in
out.
hospice. You're in hospice care. Well, you're not
I
in
am.
hospice care. You're in the hospice industry, technically, right? You're still caring for souls in some way, right?
Yes. I've been with Providence Hospice now for almost 7 years, which is amazing. And before that, I was a hospital chaplain and suffering in Hawaii at a hospital there, working with Pacific Health Ministry. If you really want to make your colleagues upset after graduation, you tell them that you have accepted a call to Honolulu, when many of them were accepting calls to places like Minnesota and Nebraska, and I was fortunate to complete a chaplain residency with Pacific Health Ministry in Honolulu, which is where the chaplain journey began.
I mean, it seems kind of like a really good progression, starting hospital work and then hospice work. Is that normally how that goes?
Yeah,
As a chaplain?
when I was, yes, it certainly can unfold that way. And in fact, I work with a few other chaplains that started out in hospital care as well. And it does make sense because certainly in the hospital, you end up working with a lot of hospice teams that come in to care for patients alongside the hospital staff. And so during my tenure in Hawaii, I worked with a lot of different hospice teams that would come in and care for our patients. And it always interests me because it's certainly a different type of care. It's certainly a different philosophy of care. It's much of a holistic approach. You know, we come in with hospice. We have, of course, our medical care team with the doctors and the nurses and the nurse aides, but then we also have our emotional care component, our service component, with our social work team, our spiritual care team, which I'm a part of, and then with Providence, we also have a whole grief services division where anybody in the community, not only our patients, but people in the community can receive counseling for free, regardless of whether or not they've been in our service. So that's a really cool component of the hospice piece that I am really proud to be a part of.
That's really cool. So I'm curious. I mean, I would imagine that as a kid, you weren't like, man, I want to be a board certified chaplain. I don't know too many kids that grow up going, you know what? I think that's what I want to. And you know what? I want to work with hospice people.
Right.
I'm early on in my life. I feel like I should be on the other side of life. That's where I'm going. So I might as well just follow the people. How do you get involved with something like that?
Following the trajectory of life right into
Life to
You
death.
know, it's so funny you say that because no, that was not the dream. And in fact, it's not. So when I was looking out in high school, you know, staring out of the window, like in algebra class and dreaming about, you know, where my life was going to go, chaplaincy was not even on the radar. In fact, it wasn't until I was in seminary, actually after my second year of seminary. I went into seminary thinking perhaps I would be on staff at a church, or I was also really interested in nonprofit service organizations. I had worked with Young Life, was on staff with them for a while, and really appreciated kind of the parachurch model where nonprofit organizations partner with churches to serve the community. And so I was kind of leaning in that direction. And then I was required to complete the dreaded CPE, Clinical Pastoral Education. And man, if anybody has talked to anybody who has completed CPE, normally it's something that people dread, or or they tell you just how difficult it is. And so I went into it with fear and trembling as well, just from everything that I've heard. Learning how to be present with people on their worst day, and it sounds like a lot of fun, right? So
Very
I went into it with the same reservations as a lot of people do, and what I found was just a love for the work, and really wanted to learn. What I came away with from that first summer was just a desire to learn how to do that well. Like, how are you present with people on their worst day, and how can you bring them some sense of hope, some sense of peace, to be present with them, to listen, to encourage them. And that whole component I just found really fascinating, because on the one hand, it just sounded so impossible. Like, how do we do this? And especially that first summer, I worked at Swedish Covenant Hospital in Chicago, where I went to seminary. It was just down the street from North Park Theological Seminary on the north side of Chicago, where I went to school. And it's an extremely culturally diverse neighborhood, and so with that, just brought just an array of philosophies and religious backgrounds, and cultural backgrounds and expectations, and the way that people grieve was very different from person to person. And so spent a lot of that summer just learning about the different cultures and where to meet people in their grief. It was just a fascinating summer, and that's what led to me wanting to pursue that more.
That's so good. So what was childhood like for you? I would imagine, based off of everything you've said so far, childhood must be a very bright, sunny, beautiful time of your life, right? We have to have the opposites here, right? We have some polarity here in the world. What was childhood like for you growing up, and what kind of child were you?
Yes, that's a great question. I split my childhood into two distinct parts, and I would say probably the first part was prior to my parents' divorce, and the second part was after my parents' divorce, which also involved a move, which was very challenging. And so the first part of my childhood, I was just a very happy-go-lucky kid, just very much into sports. I was living in southern Wisconsin at the time in a small...
They play sports in Wisconsin?
They do. If you can
ice
believe
hockey.
it. My goodness, yeah. Hockey and football. I mean, Packer fans. It's grew up in the, just baseball, track and field. I was kind of did it all, was really into basketball, of course, prior to high school, right before everybody had the growth spurt, and I stayed at my average 5'10". As soon as everybody grew, I had to sit on the bench. But yes, just happy-go-lucky kid. Just spent a lot of time with friends and playing sports, and then I would say, yeah, the big event certainly in my childhood was my parents' divorce. Not only did my parents split, but my dad, who was in hotel restaurant management, ended up taking a job in Switzerland. And so he there was certainly a lot of distance there, obviously, between my father and I. After that point, he worked in seasons, and so he would come back for a couple months a year at a time, and that's when we would spend time with him. But that was difficult. That was difficult to grapple with as a young man, and not only the divorce, but we moved from our town in southern Wisconsin to central Illinois, where my mom grew up in Decatur, to be closer to my grandparents after my parents divorced. Which is great to be closer to them. They were loving, supportive, and my grandfather definitely kind of stepped into the role as a father figure at that point. But yeah, I just after that move, I feel like it was just a very difficult transition for me. And it was right before my freshman year of high school, and so
really easy time of life, right?
Perfect time to just lose all your friends and have your dad move across the country, across the world.
I was gonna say a country.
Yeah.
You keep telling yourself that now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was a big changes all around, and so I became very withdrawn. Very. That's when I really got into less into sports, more into music, and really it was a really rough transition. Thankfully, as time went on, I did meet some lifelong friends, but that was a very, very difficult time, and really still a time that I draw from today. Just knowing when I step in to care for a patient or a family whose life has been turned upside down, it doesn't take me, I don't have to step too very far back to remember what that's like. And so I do bring that to my work as a chaplain. And I think that's really what I've learned in the process of becoming a chaplain through my training and just through hours of being present with people, is that to be present, to be empathetic, that identification piece is really huge, to be able to identify with what they're going through, to relate it to something that you yourself have gone through, because we've all been through tough times. And regardless of whether or not it's exactly or even close to what the person is going through, I certainly still know the pain and certainly know the confusion, the uncertainty, and to be able to relate in that way with people has been very powerful.
That's really cool. So you're talking about high school years of just that difficult period, and I think high school is really difficult. High school, middle school is really a difficult time in everyone's life. We're all searching, trying to figure out who we are. We're kind of in that weird stage where, we feel like we're an adult. Actually, we feel like we're a kid, but we're in like an adult body almost. And so there's, trapped inside, let us out kind of thing.
Oh,
man. And so it's an interesting time of life. And I'm curious. So 19 was the time when you kind of redeveloped your walk, your faith. And so I'm curious, what was life like during that time when you were kind of world wandering and kind of doing whatever you want, and what brought you back to faith, and what were maybe some of those lessons that you learned while you were not connected with faith?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. That season in between high school, having gone through everything that I went through and feeling like I had kind of come out on the other side of it, really found some great outlets. I was in a band in high school that I loved performing music and writing, but after high school graduation, I found myself in that crossroads season, like many people do at that age, where you have to figure out what you're going to do and at least step into the direction of what you think you want to do. And I just felt at that time of my life that there's this mantra inside of me, and I don't know where it came from. Perhaps it was God reaching out, or some people attribute it to maybe it's the Holy Spirit talking to you, speaking to you. But there was this mantra that kept repeating, that just said, okay, this is your real life now. This is where it really counts. and your life is at a crossroads, and you have to make decisions that are going to carry you not only into the next phase of life, but throughout your life. And so wherever that voice came from, I listened to it, and I just started taking baby steps, just started praying, just started kind of easing into thinking about going to church again. It really wasn't involved in a church per se at that point, but really it just started out with prayer and just kind of reestablishing that rhythm with God again. And slowly but surely, things started to open up. In fact, that's the year I found out about North Park in Chicago. So I was living in central Illinois at the time, in Decatur, and found out about this small Christian liberal arts school in Chicago. And I had it's funny because I looked through some brochures that I had gathered from a college fair a couple years earlier, and I just had a box, and I was just looking through it, and I found the brochure from North Park, and it had a little pamphlet, and it just talked about being a school where you could explore your faith in Chicago, with many work opportunities and internship opportunities. And I just thought, wow, going to the city would be so exciting. And so I went to visit and just really fell in love with the school, and ended up doing my undergrad there. I did my undergrad. I got a BA in communications, and then a couple years later went back to North Park to complete my seminary degree. So it really, finding out about that school and somehow coming across and saving the brochure changed the trajectory of my whole life. And I attribute that to reconnecting with my faith and just giving it all to God's hands at that pivotal moment.
It's so good. I love what you say about that moment where you hear that voice of this is real life. And it's kind of funny because as you say that, I almost wonder, how has that played out through the rest of your life? Because as someone, like, I'm a fan of comedy. I think there's those who think that they are funny, and then there are those who actually are funny that don't have to try. I feel like you're one of those people. You don't have to try too hard.
Well,
naturally, when you try to force it, it never comes out right. But naturally, you're funny. And so I'm curious.
My wife would attest.
My wife attests too.
Yeah.
She's always telling me stop telling jokes because they're not funny. But
wives are good like that.
They are. They keep us humble. They you got to have someone in your life that cuts you down to their own size. That's why we married small people. No, just kidding. I love you, baby. But this idea of this is real life now, that voice kind of coupled with this idea of comedy, which comedy you have to hold so loosely to things. You can't walk into a bit. You can't walk into any kind of improv thinking that you know what the outcome is going to be. You have to walk in and roll with the punches, and it shifts and it morphs. And so I'm curious, that idea of this is real life right now, has that carried through, or did that shift at one point to realize that, well, this actually isn't just life, it's whatever I want to make it?
Yeah, it's a great question. Along with stand-up, actually they kind of went hand in hand, stand-up and improv. I took improv in Hawaii. We had this wonderful theater called Laugh Track Theater, which I just fell in love with. They did improv lessons and workshops, and I got to be a part of a couple improv teams. And of course, in improv, there's a couple different schools. There's the short form improv, which is more like Whose Line Is It Anyway, where you play fun short games. But at Laugh Track, they taught long form improvisation, where you're doing several different scenes, but it works together to tell a story. And so this, especially in improv, there's a lot of talk about being in the moment and making sure that you're very present. And I think going back to that philosophy of this is my real life now, it goes back to that moment of just being wherever you are, is to be present. And because you don't, exactly like you're saying, you don't know where it's going to go. Not only do you don't know where it's going to go, but you don't know a lot of times what the audience reaction is going to be. And so that can certainly play into things. And so this whole idea of being present in the moment not only certainly serves me well in doing comedy, but that is one thing from the comedy world that I've taken into my work as a chaplain is being present, being in the moment, knowing that this moment is all that we have. You know, we're not guaranteed another hour. And so to really make the most of being present, being in that moment, and knowing that it's a gift. And so yeah, that idea of this is my real life now, and being present, and not letting, of course, letting the lessons of your past inform you, but not letting it define you too much, you know, especially if you've gone through bad seasons or difficult times, to learn from that and move forward in positive ways, but to not let it bring you down, because the moment that we're in is a gift, and we do have to make the most of it.
It's so good. I love that. So I love that you chose a really easy field with comedy and people that are going through really difficult times.
I tell you.
I don't know. There's something about the person that keeps on pursuing, that keeps on persevering through difficult times. I think we all get inspired by that, but I feel like you in particular maybe have a really deep appreciation for that. I think most comics do, because there is usually quite a bit of hardship that comes with people that come from comedy. I'm curious, how do you balance that piece of comedy in real life and the reality of, like, okay, the serious side of things, because you kind of live in this dichotomy of both, right?
I do. And in fact, it's so great that you touch on that, because I just took a class with Second City, an online class called Writing Humor Through Sadness. And it touches, and I mean, immediately when I saw the title of the class, I was like, oh, I'm in.
I'm glad that they put humor in, though, because
yes.
Writing Sadness, not so great of a class.
Right. Writing Sadness Through Sadness might be a little too...
It was very depressing.
Might be a little
worst
too
class
much.
I've ever been
Might
in.
be a little, yeah. But yeah, it was a really great class. I really appreciated the philosophy of the class, and looking at in starting with scenes from your life, or things that you've been through, or things that you have been thinking about that are sad, starting with that, and striving to find the humor in that. And so a class like that, I'm always looking for ways to bridge the two worlds. And I don't think I've even scratched the surface yet of bridging the gap between, and there is a gap. There's a gap, but there's also such a close relation to sadness and humor. Of course, that classic line of tragedy plus time equals comedy is very true. You know, sometimes we're not always able to find the humor in things in the moment, but years later we certainly can. In fact, for that class, I wrote a piece about I called it the Busboy Diaries, and it was about a difficult time working as a busboy when I was a teenager, and certainly at the time I could not have seen the humor in everything, but down the road I was able to see a lot of the people I worked with, the situations that we're in, with more of a comedic eye. And so yeah, I'm always looking to bridge that gap, and find ways that the worlds overlap, because I do think that there are a lot of ways that they do. And of course, you have to be careful using humor in the work that I do. You have to find ways that to bring it in an appropriate, uplifting, and encouraging way.
You don't do a lot of dark comedy or anything like that.
Don't do a lot of don't do a lot of dark comedy at the bedside. Doesn't never quite goes over too well, but
Not a lot. You don't do a lot of panning in the rooms.
I don't do a lot.
For all of you guys listening, I'm using all of
Not
these
a lot of
comedy
crowd
terms.
work
He's
happening.
Like, stop! You're killing me. I love what you say about finding the humor in your life, because I don't remember who said it, but they said the first day that you start to grow up is the day that you can have a real laugh at yourself. And I think it's true, because we do take ourselves so seriously. And I've seen you super serious before, but I've also seen you really like playful and funny. And there is something to that. It was funny because when you were talking about the bus boy, like for me, when you were talking about bus boy, I was like, oh, he's going to tell a really sad story of how he was the little boy at the bus stop and the bus would always drive past and he was waiting for dad to come home. And then you went, yeah, when I was a bus boy, and I was like, oh, that's a very different take of what I thought that story was going to be about.
Different bus.
Different bus. But I am curious, like, what are some other stories that you can recall that you can now look back, and maybe at the time they were painful, maybe frustrating, but what are some stories that you recall that you can now look at the humor in that and you can actually laugh at it?
Yeah. Oh, great question. Yeah. Well, certainly another piece that I wrote for the class was about my dad and how it was difficult when he moved across the country and the struggle with our relationship. Now, unfortunately, he passed away back in 2008. And, of course, with the years that have gone by, even after he has passed, I've been able to look at our relationship much differently now, with a much different perspective. And especially, I mean, as we know, once you become a parent, once you have kids of your own, you certainly look at your childhood through a different lens, perhaps with some more empathy and understanding. And I certainly know now that he was just trying to do the best that he could in the time and with what he had, and grappling with his own grief about the divorce and where he was with his career and in fact. My dad, when he moved to Switzerland, is my exact age now. So
wow,
he's. I just realized my dad was the exact age I am now when he moved to Switzerland, and so not only am I able to look at it with more understanding and more empathy and a little through the eyes of a parent, but I'm also able to look at it through the lens of humor. And my dad was a goofy guy. I mean, I think the reason why I'm so interested in the comedy is because my dad was a very jovial. He carried a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, a lot of frustration with his career and with what unfolded with my parents' marriage. But he was also a very happy-go-lucky, just a funny guy. He was actually born and raised in Italy, and my parents met when my mom did an internship at a restaurant in Geneva, Switzerland during college, and so they met one summer and fell in love, and that's when my dad came to the States and became a U.S. citizen, and were married. So, he was very much of a different world growing up, and it was evident he had a pretty thick accent. And so, just the way that he would carry himself sometimes was just very funny and very lovable. And so I'm able to look back at those pieces a little more with a little bit more appreciation now.
Yeah. You had mentioned and touched on the fact that your grandfather became a huge role model in your life. And I love on this show so far, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of grandfathers and a lot of people who have been raised by their grandfathers. And I truly do believe, and I was just saying this the other day to someone, I truly believe that grandparents have some of the greatest impact on a child's life. Like, yes, parents have a huge impact, but there's something about a grandparent that can just love and speak truth into you. I'm curious, as you
Absolutely.
look back on your relationship with your grandfather, or maybe even your grandmother too, what are some of those lessons that you remember being taught that have stuck with you and have helped you to kind of be the man, the father that you are today, the husband that you are today?
Oh, I love this question because I love talking about my grandparents. Sadly, and perhaps, they passed just prior to COVID, a couple months from each other, and we always knew that they were married 72 years, and we always knew that once one of them passed away, that the other would pass pretty soon after, and that's exactly how it played out.
They're not going to be separated.
They're no.
Neither death will separate us. We will go
No,
together.
not those two. Not those two. Oh my gosh. Yeah, they were the best. I mean, my grandfather, he taught me the value. He was a World War II veteran. He loved to tell the story about flying in the B-29 above in Japan while they were signing the peace treaty after World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, just what a historic moment, and so he was able to actually look down, and he could actually see them signing, and it was just a moment that stayed with him for his whole life. And when he would talk about the war and fighting in World War II, I mean, you could tell that for him it was like yesterday. Yeah, it was just such a pivotal experience for him, and so I was always interested in that. In fact, thankfully, a few years before he passed away, we were able to honor him with the honor flights that they do, and he was able to travel from Illinois, where he was living, to Washington, D.C. to see all the World War II monuments, and just thought that was an amazing service. Shout out to all, not only veterans, but people who care for veterans in that way. It's just a beautiful thing, and especially World War II veterans. I mean, there's just so few left, and so I was always interested in that experience, and he would just teach me a lot about just serving our country with in whatever way is meaningful, and however you can serve your community. That was something that he certainly instilled. The value of hard work. He really instilled that in me at a very young age. He was after the war, he went back to school and became an engineer. Went to University of Illinois, became an engineer. Was an engineer for several years, and then again, about my very age that I am now, he pivoted and started his own insurance company. And so he was an insurance salesman, and that's what he did. And I mean, I don't think he ever really retired, but he just slowly sold off his business. Even into his 80s, he was seeing clients and just really loved the work. And so he instilled in me the value of hard work, serving people. Communication was a big one for him. He valued communication. He, even in his younger years, took a lot of classes with Dale Carnegie and that school, and took public speaking classes and sales classes, and was just really good at talking to people, meeting people. And so he definitely instilled the value, and something that I take with me every day in my work as a chaplain is meeting people and just trying to build trust and rapport in a very short time with a very short window. I think that's something that he not only taught me, but he instilled the value of it in me. I think, and that's really the deep part. I think it's one thing to learn a skill, but to really have a deep reverence and value for it, and to see how not only how it changes you as a person, but how it impacts other people, I think is just huge. And so a lot of values that he instilled when we were younger. He had his insurance company, and then he also owned a couple of office buildings, and so he would enlist the cheap labor of his grandchildren to help paint and mow lawns and do general maintenance around his buildings. And so that was my summer job. One summer was just kind of being his go-to maintenance man. I remember I have these memories of he had his office spaces, and then he had a little workroom. It was like a little supply room where we kept all the paints and, of course, like the lawnmower and all the maintenance stuff. And that was kind of my makeshift office for the summer. And so I just have these memories of being, I can still recall the smell, just of the paint and the lawn clippings. And to this day, anytime I mow the lawn or paint, I'm transported back to that summer. But there again, I mean, it was just all about, he would wake us up early, and we would get out there, and we would work, and he would pay us probably less than minimum wage at the time, but we did get paid, and so definitely learned the value of making money and saving, and so I just countless. I love that. Thank you for asking that. That's just such a beautiful. I love thinking about them. My grandmother was a school teacher for many years, and just a faithful, just homemaker, and just she. So she was the oldest of her siblings, and she had, gosh, I think a total of, I want to say 7 siblings, and a couple of them passed away at a young age, but. So I have a lot of cousins and second cousins on my mom's side through my grandmother. And what I learned from her is she would write everybody's name down on a piece of paper and faithfully pray over everybody in the family every day. And that was her legacy. I mean, she just was so faithful to lift up the concerns of her family, and really took that on as kind of her role as the firstborn of that generation, which I just, being the firstborn I have 2 younger brothers, and so being the firstborn in my family, that's really something that really stuck out, and something I try to do, although not near as faithful as she was. So that's definitely something that I take from her life and legacy, for sure.
Well, I love the community aspect of, having a lot of family around and kind of being immersed in that. And it's interesting because I was kind of thinking about, your journeys of moving to and fro the earth. And I find it interesting. You start off Chicago, and you would say, like, the heart of the city is fast, go, 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 go. And that is the community ideal of you are hustling and bustling, getting things done. And what's interesting is at one point in your life, you take a transition and you go to kind of the polar opposite, right? You decide to spend a decade having island life. And they're very different modes of living. And so I think a lot of people understand the idea of hustle and bustle and go, like the Chicago style thing. Maybe not people here on the West Coast where, we wake up and we spend like 5 hours drinking our coffee, and then we start our day. No.
Right. I'm still drinking it.
I went through way too many. I'm already shaking. So, but I am curious for you. What did you learn from slowing down and experiencing island life? Because you hear about island life, but until you've experienced the slowing down and the absolute absence of time, That is a true thing. So if you have a problem with not keeping with keeping schedule, like if you need a schedule, do not move to an island. You will probably kill yourself. What did you learn during that time of living island life?
Oh man, so much. Love the question. Thank you. I'll never forget that first, growing up in the Midwest, primarily the Midwest. And I'll never forget that first February when I was there sitting outside in my shorts and flip-flops and just in February thinking, how is it 70 degrees, 75 degrees, the perfect sunny day, perfect breeze, and it's February. Like I just had to take a triple take at the calendar just to remind myself, this is not real. This is just not my experience growing up.
This is
at
not
all.
real life.
This is not real life. This is something. It's gonna start snowing at any moment. No. In fact, It's such a great question, and I did learn so much, and I really did have to pivot in a lot of ways. Not only in work but in life, and yet time is very different on the islands for sure. I thought that without the seasons, that time would actually slow down, and certainly during the day, and time does tend to slow, but it also, without the benchmarks of time, it the days go by slower, but the months tick by faster. It's a very, having grown up in the Midwest, it's a very odd sensation. And when we think about certain memories and things that we did while we were there, and yeah, we were there for 10 years, a good portion of our lives. Often it's hard to place when it happened, what month it happened, and what year it happened, because it all kind of blends in without those benchmarks of the season. So it was very interesting. Mm-hmm. But I learned so much from Hawaiian culture in particular, especially the love of family. Ohana is the word for family, and it's a word that that just has such a rich history and definition. And I just appreciated how, growing up, I felt like there was a lot of separation between the ages. Of course, not only in school, the different grades, but just people I hung out with. You're primarily spend time with people in your own age group or the season that you are in life. But in Hawaii, it was like everybody was together all the time. It wouldn't be uncommon to be in a staff meeting and have kids there. It wouldn't be uncommon to go to somebody's house, and a lot of people live intergenerationally there. And so you have, grandma who lives at the house, and so you have perhaps my friend's 2-year-old daughter, and their grandma, maybe even their great grandmother, also living in the house together. And so this whole idea of taking care of each other, just the love of family, the intergenerational, and yeah, time is different. Talking story is a huge value in Hawaii. Talk story. That just it's where you just sit, where you're present with somebody, where you put your agendas aside, and you just share from your heart together, which is just, and it's not only just something that people do, but it's a huge value of the culture. And so there's not this whole push to get things done at a certain time. They value talk story over getting things, just talking story over having an agenda, which is just that actually becomes the agenda. The agenda is to talk story, and through talk story and out of that relationship, you end up getting much more done and having much more of a rich experience than you would have otherwise. And so that whole idea of just being present with people and learning about their history and learning about their family and just like actually this podcast is a perfect example of talking story because it's there you end up talking about how grandparents have influenced you, and it's it's much more prevalent when they're living with you or they're with you in the conversation. There's just there's not as much separation between the generations, which I just greatly appreciated.
I love that so much. Now, there are pivotal times in our life where I feel like we all kind of have those moments where we all experience things very similarly, where there's an event that happens and we all have to stop for a moment and we question, who am I going to be during this period of my life? And two of those that come to mind are when you got married is one, because of, looking back and looking at your mother and your father. My parents are together still today, and, I thank God for that. But then there's other people, they get married and their parents were separated. And there's almost, I wonder, that moment where they say, I don't want to be a statistic. I don't want to end up like my folks. And so I'm curious for you, what was it about? I mean, because you guys have been married for a while now. It's she looks super young. I don't know what happened to you. You ate from the forbidden tree or something. It's not looking good. I'm curious,
I can't hide these grays. I can't hide these grays anymore.
They look good on you.
Oh, thank you. Distinguished.
Very distinguished.
Distinguished.
What was it about when you first got married? Was it like a decision that you made that you were going to do something differently? What was that decision that you decided that at the end of the day, I'm going to pursue my wife. I'm going to make this work no matter what. Was there something that was kind of turned on in you at that moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Coming into marriage, that's exactly right. That's the last thing I wanted. I wanted it to be different than my parents, and to lay a good foundation. And I think that's part of the reason why we waited so long to have kids. So we will celebrate 18 years of marriage. And and our daughter will be 7 this year. So we waited 11 years before we had kids, and I think that was part of really wanting to wait. And we were both on the same page in that, thankfully. And being in Hawaii, that was part of it. We both felt like Hawaii. Ultimately the reason why we loved Hawaii, and it was a big choice. I mean, we grappled for years whether or not we were going to stay there indefinitely or come back.
I could definitely understand why you would wrestle for years of whether or not you were going to leave Hawaii.
Yeah.
I do that sometimes when I go on vacation to Hawaii, and maybe we should spend another year
I really
thinking
want to
about
leave?
whether or not we should go back to the States. I mean, Oregon.
It's worth a few year wrestle over for sure. But yeah, at the end of the day, it felt like it was too far away from our family to have kids, and we just couldn't. Couldn't justify being so far away from, and not that it's an insurmountable distance, but it's long enough that it just felt like it was too far to have children. So when we came back to the mainland, as they call it, we decided then to start a family. And really we always look back with such gratitude that we did wait and that we did have that foundation, because we really built just a strong friendship. And I think looking back at my parents, I think that's what was missing. I think they got married and that they realized that foundation of friendship just wasn't there. Maybe a mutual respect, but as far as like a deep friendship, a deep understanding, a deep ability to listen to each other, and we're still learning that. In fact, we just started a class at our church called Connection Codes. I don't know, you might be familiar with, but it's just kind of tweaking communication and learning how to listen, learning how to be present. with each other, and so we're still learning how to do that. But that foundation in Hawaii, I mean, it's something that really laid the groundwork for us to be strong partners in life, to be strong partners in parenting. And so I really look back at that time with a lot of gratitude. I'm glad, I've had a lot of friends. So, going to North Park, a lot of my friends got married either soon after undergrad or just in some cases immediately after undergrad. I think I was in the first 2 years after undergrad. I think I was in 5 weddings as a groomsman. And so, a lot of people jumped into it right away and started having kids right away, which was great for them. I mean, it's what they wanted, and but for me, I just never thought, gosh, I never thought that that's what I wanted to do. I knew that I think it had a lot to do with how my parents' marriage unfolded. I just had a lot of reservations about marriage, and just really wanted to do it well. And so really building that foundation of friendship together prior to having kids. I know.
If you have kids, I'm sorry, you're doomed.
Yeah.
But
and,
that's really,
of course.
But that's really the other question that I had for you too. So there's the marriage piece, and when you get married, you start to learn things about yourself, and you start to work on yourself in a different way. The other side of things is when you start having kids, and you start learning other things about who you are, and that could be good, and that could be also really bad, because your children are really good at copying all of your bad traits. At least mine are. So I'm curious, like what would be like one of the number one things that you learned as you were holding your baby girl for the very first time?
Oh man, what a moment. I was there, right there in the room, when both my girls were born. I tell my kids every day, I was the first one that saw your beautiful face, so you better be nice to me. So,
I don't know what your mom was doing,
stop
but I
making
was
that
there.
face. Yeah. I know your face is beautiful. Why are you making that face at me? Well, I was the first one. So we have those kind of talks. But yeah, man, it does change everything. And as much as we learned as a couple together without kids, of course, it changes when you have children. And so, man, I just felt, especially holding my daughter for the first time, just this, and this, just they're just depending on you for everything. They're just so vulnerable, and they're just so new to the world, and they're looking at you with eyes that just scream, "Take care of me and don't fail me." And at least that's what I was hearing when I was looking at my daughter's eyes. And so, all those lessons that we talked about, especially that I learned from my grandparents and growing up, they all come flooding back to you in that moment. Like, okay, and it was another moment, like it was another kind of awakening that said, okay, this is your real life now. And so all those lessons that you've learned, it's time to step up, and you're officially an adult. You can't, you have responsibilities, and you need to take care of this. Life is depending on you. You literally have a life in your hands that is looking to you for guidance, and you might not think that you have a lot to offer, or you have your own insecurities, but in that moment, I think you have to put those aside and say, okay, I'm just gonna do my best. I'm gonna be the best dad I can be, and also it helps you to not only kind of rise to the occasion as a parent, but it helps you rise to the occasion as a spouse. I mean, because here you are depending on each other, and you have to do well by that kid. And I think, my Christy, my wife, and I say it all the time, one of the greatest gifts that we can give our kids is our love for each other. And I certainly feel that in light of my parents' divorce, and to just, and just the foundation that shifted a lot when I was a kid, to give them the firm foundation of our relationship and our commitment to each other. Man, I just think that's the greatest gift we can pass on to them.
Man, that is so good. I don't even know how we could end on an even better note. For all of you guys listening, I want to make sure and encourage you guys to go follow Anthony on social media. All of his links will be in the show notes here. And if you are in that space where you are looking for community, if you're looking for people to encourage you, I would love to invite you to join the More Than Before community. You can find the link here in the show notes also. It's free to join every single week. There's 3 calls with me where I teach a principle to accelerate your growth, and then we move right into coaching afterwards. So I want to invite you to that if that interests you. But I also really want to make sure you go check out Anthony's Facebook, check out his social media all over the place. It's so good. And until next time, remember to be more, see more, and experience more than before.